Something really caught my eye the other day. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's been talking quite a bit about this jump in autism rates.
Mm-hmm.
The latest CDC numbers, I think it was, estimate 1 in 31 kids now, which is, well, up from 1 in 36 just in 2020.
Right, and way up from 1 in 150 back in, 2000. It's a significant shift.
Exactly. And Kennedy himself called the increase shocking. Definitely makes you pause.
It really does. And it's stirring up a lot of conversation, which is understandable. So, yeah, for this deep dive, we should probably dig into what Kennedy's actually saying is causing this,
Yeah, and how the science community is responding.
Exactly. And just get a feel for the different viewpoints on this. It's complex. We're mainly looking at that ABC News piece you mentioned.
Right.
Because, let's face it, people have probably seen the headlines flying around.
For sure.
So the idea here is to maybe offer a bit more nuance, a deeper look at what everyone's actually arguing.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start with Kennedy's position. He seems pretty adamant that this isn't just, we're better at diagnosing it now or the definitions change.
Mm-hmm. He's quite firm on that.
He even used that phrase, epidemic denial, for people in the media who lean on the diagnosis explanation.
Yeah, he did. He seems really suspicious of anyone who doesn't want to focus on, as he puts it, environmental exposures.
Right. He believes it's something in the environment.
That's his core argument, that this steady rise isn't just an artifact of how we count or define it. He thinks we might be missing crucial environmental triggers.
And he's actually doing something about it, right? He tasked the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, to start new studies.
Yep, looking into a whole bunch of potential factors.
The article listed mold, food, pesticides.
Right, medicines, even things like ultrasounds.
Ultrasounds, wow, okay. And the age and health of the parents, too.
Yeah, it's a really wide net they're casting there. It shows where his focus is, clearly.
Definitely putting resources behind that idea.
And, it's interesting. His timeline seems to have shifted a bit.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, apparently he'd told President Trump earlier that he expected we'd know the cause of the, quote, autism epidemic by September.
Okay.
But now the language is more like these new studies will provide some of the answers by September, though he was still pretty direct, saying we know it's an environmental exposure. So still quite certain in his view.
You can definitely sense the urgency he feels. He talks about how autism affects families, kids, and he paints a picture of, potential limitations for some people with autism. Pretty stark terms.
Absolutely. He uses strong language. It underscores how serious he sees the issue, focusing on the challenges and the difficulties families might face. It's a narrative of significant hardship.
Okay. But then you look at the experts cited in that same article and, they seem to emphasize different factors for the rising numbers, particularly the diagnosis angle.
Right. And that's, a really key counterpoint. People like Dr. Catherine Lord at UCLA, she agrees, yes, it's a fair question to ask why the rates are rising.
Okay.
And she doesn't totally dismiss environmental factors, saying they could play a role. But she really highlights that a big chunk of this increase is likely down to the expanding definition of autism.
Expanding definition.
Yeah, and just more awareness generally, especially identifying autism in people without severe intellectual disabilities. That's become much more common.
So the checklist, basically.
Yeah.
The criteria doctors use.
Exactly. Those diagnostic criteria, they've gotten broader over time. They added new descriptors, even as recently as 2013.
So it's not just finding people who always had it. It's that the definition itself now includes more people.
Precisely. The criteria have evolved. Think about how the DSM-5 back in 2013 rolled several conditions like Asperger's into the single diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder.
Right, I remember that.
That change alone would naturally sweep in more individuals who might have had a different label or maybe no diagnosis before. So, boom, the numbers go up.
Okay. But then you had Dr. Walter Zarodny from Rutgers. He was actually at the press conference with Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And he argues there's a true increase, something more than just awareness or definition changes.
Yeah, he kind of echoes Kennedy's concern there.
He pointed out, a 300% increase in 20 years. He finds it hard to believe that's all just because we got better at spotting it.
Right. He acknowledges awareness as part of it, but argues that such a huge jump suggests something else is going on, too, a real rise in incidence.
So he's saying we need to look seriously at those environmental or other risk factors.
Exactly. He thinks they must be involved somehow and is urging a serious investigation.
And the article also brings up genetics, right? That always seems to be part of the autism discussion.
Oh, absolutely. It mentions research suggesting autism risk is, quote, heavily rooted in genetics, like potentially up to 80% of the risk.
80%, wow, that's high.
It is. But it also notes that genetics might interact with certain outside factors.
Like what?
Well, things like older parents or maybe exposure to pollutants. That's what some experts suggest. Dr. Lord did add, though, that it's been hard to consistently replicate findings for non-genetic causes.
So it's tricky.
Yeah, she's not ruling them out, but the evidence isn't as solid or easy to pin down, it seems. So genetics looks like a really big piece, but how it connects with environment, that's still kind of fuzzy, an active research area.
So genetics provides maybe the susceptibility?
Yeah, lays the groundwork, perhaps.
But environmental factors might still play a role in triggering it or interacting with those genes. We just don't have all the answers there yet.
Exactly. The genetic link seems strong, but the specifics of environmental interaction, still lots of questions.
It was also interesting seeing how some people within the autism community reacted to Kennedy's comments. Dr. Barry Priesen, for example. He felt Kennedy's description kind of misrepresented what life with autism is actually like for many families.
Yeah, that's a really important voice to include. Dr. Priesent's point is that, yes, there are challenges, absolutely, but it's not only challenges.
Right.
He talked about parent retreats he runs where families share the whole picture, positives and negatives, the joys as well as the challenges.
A more balanced view.
Exactly. And remember that CDC stat we mentioned, fewer than 40% of kids diagnosed with autism also had an intellectual disability.
Oh, right.
So that suggests a really wide spectrum of abilities and experiences, maybe broader than Kennedy's comments implied. So, yeah. How we talk about it matters, too.
Definitely. And then Autism Speaks also weighed in pretty strongly.
They did. They called Kennedy's comments extremely disappointing and damaging. Oof.
Yeah, strong words.
Their main point was basically, look, autism is not a preventable condition. And they argue that linking it to toxins without solid scientific proof just spreads misinformation.
And distracts from what people need now.
Right. Distracts from supporting autistic people and their families, getting them the resources they need. They seem worried it fuels, maybe harmful or outdated ideas.
Gotcha. But despite all that pushback, Kennedy is sticking to his guns about the science, saying the NIH will do the studies.
That's what he stated, yeah. He's got Dr. Bhattacharya leading it at NIH, and he pledged to follow the science no matter what it says.
Even if it doesn't point to environmental causes.
That's the pledge. So that commitment to the research process itself is, well, something to watch.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've got Secretary Kennedy really pushing this idea that environmental factors are the main reason for the autism rate increase.
Right. Very focused there.
But then much of the scientific community seems to be saying, well, hold on. A lot of this is probably changing definitions, better awareness, plus a big genetic component.
Though they're not completely shutting the door on environmental factors, just emphasizing the other parts more based on current evidence.
Right. So it's definitely not straightforward. Different reads on the same numbers, really.
Exactly. And hopefully listeners now have a clearer picture of these contrasting views from that ABC report. Kennedy's focus on environment leading to new research versus the expert focus on diagnosis, awareness, and genetics, while still acknowledging environment needs, well, more solid research.
This whole thing, it just really highlights how much we're still figuring out about conditions like autism, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's complex.
And with these different takes and the promise of new research, it kind of makes you wonder,
Yeah.
about the whole process of understanding these things. What happens when you focus so heavily on one potential cause, especially when the science is still developing?
Yeah, that's a good question to leave people with. What are the implications, not just for research funding and direction, but for how we talk about autism, how families feel, how autistic individuals themselves are seen? It definitely gives you something to think about regarding the impact of these different narratives.